Hello, I'm working on a language and I thought it'd be time to show it off, make a couple of videos about it. And the first thing I'm going to be showing here is the preprocessor macros, and then we're going to move on to other things in other videos, but let's just start with macros. So when it comes to macros, you use them the same way that you do in C. You define a macro like this instead of define, and then you say some sort of name for the macro, and then the content of the macro. So let's say this, let's say pi, and then we can use this macro. So we can say, let's just put some text here like this, and do that, and then we can compile, and in the output we see that we have OK, we have equals, and then our constant or macro there was replaced by 3.14. Very nice. Macros does work. They're functional. Very cool. What else can we do? Well, obviously we're not limited to just like a number. We can put like a function in here if you want. We can do all sorts of stuff in here. So we can do something like this if you want, and that works as well. We can even have it on multiple lines if you want. So if you have it, you can have it on one line. Then you don't need this end macro. If you want it on multiple lines, then you do need this end macro. So to put it on multiple lines, for example, we want an OK, we want a print hey, for example. We can do it like this, and then we can put pi like this, and now we can see it in there. The indentation is a little bugged here apparently. It's work in progress. It's hard to get the indentation right because we're like replacing this with things on multiple lines. It's a little sketchy, but that's alright. We can see it was in fact replaced by 2 at least, by the two like statements, so that's nice. What else can we do? Well, we can use this macro with the if directive. So if directive, so let's, well, I think if you know C, you know what this is, but we can have yes, no, and then we can have pi, for example. If we compile, we can see that we get a yes. Why? Well, this if directive checks, okay, does pi exist? Is this a macro? It is a macro since we define it here, so this code runs. If we rename this, then we can see that we get a no, because pi does not exist. If we want, we can do an elif, so we can do, let's say, maybe, for example, and then we can do an else if we want, and then we can define a maybe here, perhaps. Yes, maybe, like this. Now we get a maybe instead, so we can also use elif if you want. This else is not necessary if you don't want it, so if we don't define any of these, we see we get nothing because we removed that else directive that we had. So that's conditionals with the preprocessor. Then we have some other cool things, which is, let's say we define a macro, let's say we want to do some printing. We want to print something like this at, let's say log. So if we type log a couple of times like this and then compile, we can see that we get this. So we get 3 statements. Alright, so the first statement is at 7, and that's because we use this line, and where this macro was, the line was 7, so we get a 7 here. Here we get 10 and 12, 10, 12, makes sense. We can also do column, and then we can like make a couple of different columns like this, and we can see that, okay, the first one is at column 1. We can see here down here that it is in fact column 1. We can see that this guy is at column 5, which makes sense, and then this is 13, also makes sense. Some other things you can do is you can also do file, So that's another macro, and we can get the file. So this is like built-in macros that gets information about the file, or the file, I guess. So we can get the file name if you don't want the directory, and then we can also get the date if you want. And there is also a special one which is called unique, and every time this unique occurs, there is a counter that is incremented, and this counter is global for the whole compilation. So when you're importing other files like this, for example, the uniques in this file and in hello.btb we would always get a unique number from this, is what I'm trying to say. So next up is arguments. So let's say we may not just want to type, we may actually want to provide some arguments to this function. Let's say we want to log 5, for example. Well, we can do just that, like this. And we can see that if we get 5, we can also have more arguments if we want. And this is a good thing actually. So here we have an error. So let's actually show the errors. So this error says, okay, macro madness. What's happening? Well, while processing the macro log, log where? Well, this file. So if you click on this, we get to this line here. Okay, so this macro here, the evaluation of the macro log with 1 argument occurred. That's a little typo there, I should say 1 argument. Okay, so this had 1 argument. This is not allowed since log is not defined for that amount of arguments. Makes sense, we actually defined 2 arguments here, but here we only specified 1. And then we can see the definitions. So here is our usage, and here is the definition. And we can see clearly that we're actually missing 1. So let's add 1. And now it works, very nice. So next up is nested arguments, or nested macros. So let's say we have, let's say we want to do a little add. Yeah, let's say we want to do a little add like this, and a little add like this, and we want to print that, and then this add adds these numbers together, and then we can do this again. So you can see we can nest macros, and it does not matter which order we do this in. Macros are defined globally within this file, so it's all good. So what's actually happening here? Well, we first encounter, so the preprocessor first encounters this log. Then it goes to check this. Okay, it goes into print. Is print a macro? No, it's not. Then so it outputs the print and then the parentheses, and then it says this is add a macro. Yes, it is actually. And so then it goes into processing this guy, and then so then you go in here, x. Okay, where is x? Well, x is this guy. It's this guy, then this, and then this. So it's a little bit of a recursive thing, or iterative thing, or however you want to call that. So that's pretty nice as well. But now we're getting to the really interesting stuff. Let's say you have an add function or add macro like this, and you want to add 2 numbers together. That's great and all, but what if you want to add 3 numbers together? Well, I guess we will have to make like a separate macro for it, like this. Well, that's pretty annoying, isn't it? That's pretty annoying. So we can do this, and then if we do, if we then do the, let's add 2, what's this, and then add 3, what's this. So let's actually showcase that we're actually computing the things we believe. Right, add 2, add 3. So we can see we have to define them like an integer here to do this. This is really scuffed, right? No one likes this. Well, luckily we can actually omit this 3 here. Like, we don't need this. Like, it's not like we're omitting it. There is no 3. We can just do this, and it just works, because when we see this macro here, we can see that we pass 2 arguments. and we haven't defined multiple macros under the same name, well, then you check the arguments. Okay, are we using 2 arguments? If so, then we will call this macro. If we're using 3, we will call this macro. If we use 0, you see we get a complaint from the compiler. Well, that's nice. What if we want some arbitrary amount of arguments? Maybe we don't want just 2 or 3, maybe we want like 5 sometimes, maybe we want 10, you know, we want all kinds of combinations. Well, then we can do ... And what ... does is that it allows us to specify any amount of arguments like this. And see if we get a bunch of arguments. We still have a problem though. We see a bunch of commas. These commas, that's amazing if we're doing a print function like this. Something like this. A buffer, who knows, something like this perhaps. I'm doing a little log, let's comment this out for now. Something like this. Well, that's nice. So in this case it's nice. We can do this ... It's separated by commas. It works super nicely for functions like this. We have a little buffer and then our arguments that we want to print, and we can specify any amount of arguments and in the kind like this. So that's nice. But for this add thing here, this doesn't quite work. We want the plus to be here. This is where recursive macros come in actually. So with recursive macros, we can do add our remaining arguments like this. And then if we run this, we can see that that works nicely. So now we can see this plus here. Okay, nice. We can do recursive macros. This is not something you can do in C, by the way. So now we get into the real cool stuff. But we don't want this plus here, right? We don't want that here. Why does this happen? Well, when you create a variadic argument like this, there is an implicit macro that is created with 0 arguments that is empty. And so that's why if we do just 1 like this, we'll see that we get 1, so this 1 is evaluated, and then we see this plus, and then when we get to see our remaining arguments, we have none, so this implicit macro is called, this implicit add is called here, and so that's why we get this extra plus here. But we're not out of luck, because the argument matching I showed you before works here as well. So if you go back to this thing, now we complain because we need to specify more arguments. Actually, yeah, I'm missing n macro. Okay. So we can do 1. The 1 matches with this. If we do 2, it's... oh wait. So if you do 2 arguments, we can see that we actually match in this instead. So when we match, we prioritize the amount of, like, the specific amount of arguments, and if this does not match, then we go for this. So if we then do our recursive madness here with this ... and then if we specify this guy here, then this might just work. As we can see, it does work. Well, that's nice. So now we can specify any amount of arguments here. And because of this recursive nature and functionality we have here, we don't see this extra plus at the end. So that's pretty cool. And this is kind of where I want to leave, because this is kind of what I wanted to show. Now, there is one extra thing that I want to show, just a little cool thing. So sometimes you know how you write code where you check, let's say you have some sort of enum here with some number, and then you check, okay, is yeah, if it's 1, or if x is 2, or if x is 3, these numbers here assume that you have some kind of enum or something. x is 5. This happens sometimes, and that's kind of annoying to write. Well, can we do something with macros to help with this? Yes, we can. We can say equals, and then we can say the thing that we want to equals, or like the thing that, yeah, the thing we want to equals, and then some amount of arguments. Now, we can't just do this, right? Because we want some sort of y here, and then some sort of or, and then recursively call equals. Something like this. Let's see, let's minimize this a little bit. And then we once again need a blank. I'm not gonna go through explaining this too much, or maybe I will actually. Anyway, you can type something like this, and then we can replace this with if x is 1, 2, 3, or 5. Well, isn't that nice? We just typed this and we got all this functionality from it. So what the hell is happening here? Well, so we do our equals. We see that x here is passed every time. And then we got this y here. So we can take out 2 arguments from this variadic macro here. So we can take out 2 arguments and match those like this. And then we can pass the rest. So you're not limited to doing just one like this. You can actually do multiple. And we can also see this, we can also do some crazy stuff. So if we do hi and then x, and then we can have our variadic arguments in the middle. I forgot to show you this actually. Where we call this recursively. Should we do something like this perhaps? Where if we now type like a bunch of numbers here, we can see we get this. And that's because we can take out the x and the y at the ends, as you can see. So you can specify this in the beginning. You can also specify it like this if you want. And if we do this, we can see that our arguments here are reordered quite a bit. So yeah, this is macros. This is the preprocessor. Pretty powerful, pretty cool, especially with the variadic arguments and the recursion there. And this has been the demo for macros and the preprocessor. So I hope you found it interesting, and I'll see you next time for some more cool stuff in the language. Although, to be honest, I think macros is probably the coolest thing in the language. The other things are quite basic, like polymorphism. You've seen that in other languages with overloading and everything. So the other stuff is kind of just basic things. But so have a good time, and see you next time.